Hey y'all! Today's adventure is historic Dudley Farm State Park in Newberry, Florida. Newberry, Florida is right outside of Gainesville, and this is a representation, an authentic representation of a traditional farm from back over a century ago.
Traditionally, a swept dirt yard surrounded the house. This was done for a number of reasons, most importantly for the protection of the wooden structure from the occasional Florida wildfires. The front yard was considered a showplace by the 1920s. Ornamental and heritage plants such as the antique rose, hydrangeas, various types of lilies, camellias, amarilla, crepe myrtles, and gloriosa adorn the farmyard. Located in the front yard is a bulb shed built to store plant bulbs during winter. The flower bulbs were an important part of the Dudley income during the early part of the 1900s. Surrounding the farmhouse, you will see other useful trees and shrubs such as pecans, black walnut, Florida peaches and pears, muscadine grapes, and figs. Constructed in the Florida cracker style, this house was built by P.D.H. Dudley Jr., often known as Ben, in the early 1880s for his wife, Sarah, and their 3 children. Eventually, the house would be the home for 12 Dudley children. Constructed with a vertical board and batten exterior, this house was built high off the ground to allow air circulation around and underneath the building. The house contains 4 large rooms, 2 each on either side of a central hallway with high ceilings, allowing for better cross ventilation and airflow. A steeply pitched roof covers an attic area, which eventually became the bedrooms for the Dudley girls. The first floor rooms are the guest room, parlor, parents' room, and the boys' room. Have you noticed the missing room in the house? One is the kitchen, located behind the house. Historically, the kitchens were located away from the main house to protect the house from accidental fires and to separate the heat associated with wood cooking from the living spaces.
What do you have to say for yourself, you big turkey?
The dairy and canning house are located to the east of the farmhouse back porch, in a region which was considered the woman's work area. It was a right clever multi-purpose building. As you face the building, to the left is the canning house that contains many shelves. This was an important area to store preserved foods and certain types of seeds from the house garden. Adjacent to the canning house, you will see the dairy house. This area is used to store milk, butter, and cottage cheese. The dairy house is built up on legs and has its own roof to allow for air circulation. This small box-like storage area acted as a primitive refrigerator. Behind the kitchen is the smokehouse. The single-story building has a dirt floor and a salt trough. Salted meat hung on the cross beams to be cured over hot coals.
This is the male, and the female is over here hiding behind the gate.
Centered around the mule and horse stables, corn crib, milking stall, tack room and barns, all enclosed with a split rail fence made out of longleaf pine with a lime rock rubble foundation. These buildings were an important part of any working farm. Horses were used for transportation and cattle ranching, while mules were typically used to work the planted fields. The Dudleys had a pair of army mules that Myrtle described as just mean. Myrtle would go into the mule lot to gather the chicken eggs, which were randomly laid in the horse troughs in the hay. And whenever the mules would chase her out of the lot, causing her to burst the slats out of the gate, getting away.
It's beautiful.
During the Great Depression, a substantial chicken business was started by two of the Dudley sisters. They raised up to 600 barred Plymouth Rocks and Rhode Island Reds to produce eggs. 3 chicken houses remain on the farm. What is called the Long House is located behind the old general store. Another 2 smaller houses and the brooder house are also located in the farm area. Now, if you need to buy some items or pick up the mail, please head to the general store.
The general store and post office. When it was closed down in 1915 or 1916, this 1890s building was moved by the Dudley family, rolled on logs, and pulled by mules to this present location. Originally, the store sat out front of the railed fence on the old road to Gainesville, in the open area under the big cedar tree. It served the community of Dudley with its 20 neighboring families. Mail was delivered twice a week by horse and buggy. Now, stepping up into the old store, you can see what it looked like full of merchandise. Copies of original Dudley invoices sit on the counter. The post office boxes are visible on the left. While cleaning out the general store to get it reorganized as it is today, we opened the large Crisco can on the counter, and in it found an 1862 letter from Captain Dudley during the war between the states. Writing home to his wife from Florida Camp Finnegan, 1 May, 1862. My dear wife, I hope this will find you and the children all well as it does me and Joe. Well, we are camped 7 miles from Jacksonville on the railroad. It was a tiresome trip. We heard the Yankee guns yesterday morning. They were on the St. Johns River. This is a desolate-looking country. There are but few people living down here. Take care of yourself and the children. Write soon, and let me know how all is. I remain your loving husband, P.B.H. Dudley.
The sweet potato cellar was built sometime before 1900 on a sunken lime rock foundation about 4 feet deep with an A-frame timber roof. Ben made wooden shingles from straight-grained longleaf pine grown on the property. The current roof is a reconstruction set upon the original lime rock walls. The Dudley family had been growing sweet potatoes since at least the 1860s, and they usually pulled in 100 or so bushels a year.
Homegrown source of sweetening, the Sugar Cane Complex. This 1880s farm structure was built for Dudley family use and was used as well by the whole community of neighbors. From Thanksgiving to Christmas was a very active syrup-making time. The children were out of school then and could help. The men would strip and cut the tall stalks of sugar cane, and the women would prepare the syrup bottles for filling and provide a good noon meal for all the workers. In early morning, the mule would be hitched to the cane mill sweep and begin walking in a circle, turning the mill that grinds the sugar cane, squeezing all the juice out of the stalk. The mule continues his circular walk for an hour and a half while men feed the mill with cane stalks. Miss Myrtle Dudley told us, after he's walked a good mile, you've got to turn that mule around and let him go the other way. You don't want to see a dizzy mule. She was kidding us, for the mill with its big rollers can turn only one way. When the barrel of juice is full, it's time to fill the big 60-gallon syrup kettle and light a fire in the cane furnace. The juice begins to heat up and bubble for 4 hours with skimming and stirring.
Originally 1 acre in size and east of the farmhouse, the house garden grew the vegetables the family would consume for the year. Some of the vegetables that would be grown during this time would have been tomatoes, squash, okra, potatoes, various types of peas, onions and beans. In later years, the house garden was moved to its present location. The house garden traditionally was rotated with the chicken pen areas, which provided natural fertilizer to the soil.
Throughout the 1920s, the boll weevil blights decimated cotton crops across Florida. The Dudleys quickly switched to tobacco for their main cash crop, and they built this barn around the year 1930 to dry the tobacco leaves in a process called curing. First, the freshly harvested leaves were strung to stakes. Then these stakes were carried up into the rafters of the barn by children, then called rafter roosters, and hung out to dry. The Dudleys built the barn with vertical boards inside and out, sandwiching tar paper lining atop a high lime rock foundation. A furnace on the eastern side generated the heat to dry out the leaves over a week-long period. Originally heated by a wood furnace, they added a gas burner and interior piping to distribute the heat in the late 1940s. Vents around the bottom of the structure and at the top gables regulated the temperature, gauged by a hanging thermometer which needed 24-hour monitoring. While a gas burner could generate consistent heat, in the earlier wood-burning days, the perfect temperature was achieved by adjusting the mix of fuel. Green oak for a slow, consistent burn, and fast-burning fat pine to raise the temperature.
Miss Myrtle remembered the cattle drives that passed through Dudley Farm when she was a child in the 1900s. In one quote she said, "Here they would come, whooping and hollering and cracking their leather cow boots." The cowmen drove their cracker cows along the old Gainesville Road. Cracker, or scrub cows, are descendants of various Spanish cow breeds brought over by the Spaniards during the early 1500s. Considered their own breed, crackers are a small, hardy cow well adapted to the harsh Florida climate. The Florida Fence Law of 1949 ended free-ranging cattle herds. Originally, the pastures might have been sandhills or longleaf pine woodlands, but farming changed the landscape of Florida. Dudley Farm Historic State Park maintains a small herd of these cattle in several pastures.
So this path we're walking on right now is actually Old Gainesville Road.
Known as cow hunters, Florida cattlemen have a long history and diverse heritage in caring for the animals first brought to the New World by Spanish conquistadors. From runaway slaves to Native Americans driven from the homelands to Scotch and Irish immigrants looking for new lands to grow their crops on, the Florida cracker reaches deeply back into the state's history. During the war between the states, the American Civil War, federal forces cut off the flow of cattle to Confederate forces. Florida was called on to supply much of the beef for the Army of Tennessee in and about the battle for Atlanta and much of the final years of the war. Because of this heavy drain on Florida herds, cattle from Texas were imported to restore numbers to the herds, bringing with them the dreaded Texas cattle tick and associated tick fever around the turn of the 20th century. These animals had to be dipped in solutions ranging from crude oil to arsenic and creosote.
John and I had a fantastic time today here at historic Dudley Farm State Park. We learned a lot and we had fun at the same time. So it's really great when you can add a little learning in with your fun adventure. And we hope you continue to follow our journey as we learn about this great state that we call home. We're learning things that we never even knew that we didn't know. So continue to follow our journey and we'll see you next time.